Well, it's time for Eco Watch, and of course our focus tonight is what is the status of the environment, coming at a time when we are marking the World Environment Day, and the greatest concern is the environment is choking under plastics, and in fact it is believed that microplastics in the sea are more than the stars in the galaxy. That is how big the problem is. And we're just trying to look at what are some of the things that we can do to try and improve our environment, sustain our environment, to ensure we have a proper way of life. And to help us understand more on the status of the environment, joining me now is John Kioli, who is the chairperson of the Kenya Climate Change Working Group, as well as a member of the National Climate Change Council, as well as the CEO for Green Africa Foundation, that is Mithika Mwenda from the Pan-Africa Climate Justice Alliance, and we will be discussing some of these issues. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming to our studios today. All right, looking at a scorecard, on a scale of 1 to 10, in your perspective, where do you think we are in terms of taking care of our environment, the status of our environment?
I think I will give 4.
4?
Yeah.
That is below 50%.
Yes.
Why is that?
You know, we have, first and foremost, we are from today, we also were celebrating as they were at the national level. We joined the Nairobi County government to plant trees, and they bring people together. So we planted around 50,000 the whole 2 weeks. So that is action. So the problem which we have in Kenya is that there is a lot of policies. And we are very good in doing policies, but implementation becomes zero. So you have a problem with the implementation bit of it? The policy implementation and the policy failure. Yeah.
What about for you? He said 4. What would you?
Great. Thanks for hosting us today. I think for me, I can give it, I'll add another 2 to make it 7. The reason why I'm saying this
Another 2 would make it 6.
Would make it 6, yes, to make it 6.
Yes.
The reason why I'm saying this is because towards the end of 2016, we got the Climate Change Act signed by the President, which was a gift to this country. And I think that catapults the whole issue of environment and the essence that the government is quite involved in it. Number 2, we are seeing a lot of energized Ministry of Environment right now with Honorable Tobiko. And I think this again shows commitment from government that we are moving to the right direction, although there are so many obstacles. But you can see that really it's getting the attention politics can take, attention the health sector can take, attention the education sector can take, because nobody talks about environment. So what obstacles do you feel you're still facing? I think issues of sustainability of the policies my brother has talked about are challenging. When you looked at the sector of charcoal sector right now, most of the counties, about quite a number of counties in the charcoal hotspots have banned charcoal. But right now, the charcoal industry is fighting back because these are cartels and these are people who have been living, feeding on charcoal. It's a 32 billion industry. So it must fight back. So for me, I think you see a lot of commitment from one side, but it will take time to sustain it. Mithika, as he's saying, the cartels are fighting back, but are we giving them options? When we tell them we have banned charcoal, what are the options?
Actually, that is a very good question, because you realize that the country, I think 80% of the population relies on biomass in cooking and domestic energy. And so when we are saying, let us abandon charcoal, what options do we give these communities? Remember that most of them are not reached by electricity. The national grid, we are trying, of course, the last mile and those others, but we have not reached there. So what I was saying is, we need actually a policy Whether we have I know we have a very progressive, a very good, active minister who is actually making things be done. But we need to think beyond an individual because we need sustainable, we need effective institutions and effective policies. We have MCA, we have at climate change level, we have national climate change policy, we have national green economy policy, we have everything. And what he's talking about, look at the Climate Change Act 2016. If you look at its origin, it was actually not even the government we started. This was started, it was an effort between us, civil society, and members of parliament. The government, Ministry of Environment, came just later when we raised momentum on it. And so, and that's why we are talking about that policy implementation, because policy will not end by only formulation without that implementation. We have done actually just 1 minute. This is now a National Climate Change Action Plan 1. We have exhausted this 2017, and we are doing another one. Now we have started doing another one. So the question is, what did we achieve? If we look at this, we didn't.
Based on what you're saying, this is another document.
Yes.
So what have you done in terms of implementation of this particular document?
And these are the question, actually. I hope that is a rhetorical question because it is not an individual as myself or Mithika, not him. It's the whole system. What have we done? So what happened is that we had a very good policy, but it didn't have resources. Resources to implement.
So there is no money towards
no money and the resources. And even that framework, implementation framework, which was activated by the new Climate Change Act. So in what we are envisioning is NCAP 2 is going to have now framework because we have the law which is going to be implemented. We are doing well.
So the goodwill to implement it is what you're pushing.
Well, it is there.
Okay. All right. Let's look at, what you've talked about charcoal. We are talking about the World Environment Day.
Yes.
The theme today, of course, is a focus on beating plastic pollution.
Yes.
Kenya banned plastic bags, but we still have the problem of plastic bottles. How do we address this?
Thanks. I think world over, we deposit about 300 million metric tons of plastic annually, globally, and only 10% is recycled. That is a huge amount of plastic that ends somewhere. And the records show that 7% goes to the sea. So as the government officials were saying back in Kwale, that we are destroying our own environment, this needs to go down to the users of plastic. We need to go advocacy level to the people so that they realize the environment belongs to them. Second thing is that I believe this was a good move, but options were not given to the users of plastic.
So how do you think we can change the consumer habits? Because
that's the thing. If you want to pack meat, it's a bit challenging. You want to pack your sukumas, it's a bit challenging. So I think what we need now is to come up with, actually the government should come up with a very good strategy of what is the replacement of plastic bags. Because it's a big problem. And I think right now people really want to do away with them, but they don't know what to replace it.
It's a question of, again, do you give them an option? When you ban the plastics,
this should go
what are you telling them to use?
This should go hand in hand.
Yes.
And enforcement should be upped a little bit, because the enforcement is not, it's only like, for me, the enforcement is at 20%.
Is at 20%.
To be sincere, because you can still see them.
So how do you think we can address it?
I think it just all boils around the culture. How do we culture ourselves? And the question of the mode of production and consumption, which we have. If I ask you, what is the source of those plastics? And the bigger question for us in Kenya, now that we are thinking about sustainability, we are thinking about the challenge of climate change. We are talking about all these other challenges which are affecting us. So when we look at that plastic in a narrow perspective, that is where we are going to making a mistake. Because every time now we need even to ask ourselves, how did we reach here? Yes, it was banned, but people are using it because they have no options. So I think we really need to be, that was actually a milestone. and we are celebrating and celebrating all over the world.
So has it been effective, the ban on plastics in itself?
Well, I think we have made some progress in that, but we need to do more. How we need to do more is to incentivize the private sector, for instance. Because we have seen, then you go to a supermarket these days, unless and I have capacity to buy a 10 shilling bag. But what about that woman in the village who will not afford that? So I think Kenyans are very innovative. We invented the M-Pesa, which has gone viral across the globe, and even this one. So I think we can, and I think we are making progress in cities, but we need really. So it is not about enforcement. It is not about forcing people. I think let us
it's
culture
more of
people,
empowerment,
more empower people, changing people's habits.
All right, let's look at another aspect of the environment, climate change. One day we are talking about flooding. That has been the situation for the past couple of weeks. Now we're also talking about we're heading towards drought. Obviously, the climate change is a big issue. In terms of addressing it, where do you think we are as a country?
I think the government has, as a country, let me say as a country, we have tried, because in 2010 we had the National Climate Change Response Strategy. In 2013 we had the National Climate Change Action Plan. And good enough, in 2016 the President signed the Climate Change Act 2016. Right now we have policies which can be able to move this agenda quite forward. What we need is most of the counties have actually embraced issues of climate change. I'm aware that 42 counties have a CEC who is actually directly dealing with climate change. For me, that's a milestone. And about 5 counties, namely Wajir, Isiolo, Garissa, Kitui, and Makueni, already have a climate change legislation. So for me, that is already done. What we need to do
What about coordination between the national and the county government?
That's where I'm going to. Yes. We need the counties, because most of the work, about 80%, is implemented by the counties. We need the counties to entrench climate change in their CADP and put some resources to climate change. But finally, I think we need to look at climate change and disaster risk reduction, what Red Cross does, to marry it together with issues of climate change, so that we set aside money, not for emergency, but to plan ahead. We know that Tana River will flood at this moment, and we cannot just wait for Tana River to flood. We have mechanisms, and we put resources aside, not just resources for disaster. We need to merge the two, so that these two organizations are talking. Organizations of climate change and organizations of emergency, so that we plan ahead and we put resources in issues of climate change as well as disaster.
Is there clarity, between how the national and the county government will work for this really to kick off?
I think we have actually a very impressive framework, the Climate Change Act 2016. That has solved all the problems. It defined the role of the counties, the National Climate Change Council as the Council of Governors chair as a member, and at local level it is really defining. Many counties actually are requesting us to help them, even as we speak now, to see how they can trickle down the National Climate Change Act at county level. And
but are resources being generated towards this, been allocated towards this implementation?
Well, these are some of the issues which, and you have to understand actually the challenge of climate change. Kenya, as a third world country, developing country, according to the climate change, the Paris Agreement and all those international agreements we have signed, I think we have put a lot of resources into this. But the question is, do we have that capacity even to absorb the disasters which we have? In Kikuyu Springs, where we end up meeting today, those are the questions people were asking. The challenge and the impacts of climate change are so intense that we can, as a country, we are going to exhaust all our resources if we put resources into doing it. And that's why the question of responsibility of the donors and those countries, because it is not the cause of us, but of those countries which cause this problem. But that's aside, we have also a responsibility. We have done our responsibility, and the responsibility is that we have the law. Right now, I'm aware that even the Treasury is going to put money into the National Climate Change Fund already. So all those things are being done. But how far will we go? So what we need to do as a country is we need to look at climate change now as an opportunity. There are a lot of resources. There is been established an international bank on climate change, the Green Climate Fund based in South Korea. We have at African level many funds which are there. Are we tapping that before we even think about ours? So these are some of the things, and I think with this framework we are going to be able to reach there.
All right. As a National Climate Change Council, I know you've been set up to do the work of coordination. In terms of environmental threats, what are some of the things that you think you need to prioritize, even as we wind up the show, because we've run out of time?
One is actualization of the Climate Change Directorate, which is now up and running, and populating it with resources. I'm aware the parliamentary committee passed like 200 million towards this agenda, and I think that's a milestone. Number two is actualizing of the Climate Change Council so that it has the teeth, because it's chaired by the president, and it has the teeth to have that mission of controlling climate change in the country. The third thing is the connection between the counties and the national government. I think the process has already started, but we need also the counties to understand that they are the people on the ground, they are the people who need to push the agenda, and they are the people suffering. So if they push the agenda, they put resources towards climate change and the national government, and you can see there's a lot of goodwill, we can push the agenda of climate change easily.
All right, Mwenda, I know you're really trying to do a lot of awareness when it comes to environment. That is something that we've also seen the government really keen on. And you have come up with the words, perhaps, for the media to try and encourage. Tell us about that as we wind up the program.
Thank you very much. But before I mention, I want to mention two things about the council. So we need actually, over and above the council, we need people's ownership of those processes. We need to trickle them down.
So that is directed to John.
So it is not even about John, it is about all of us who are participants in this and stakeholders. So coming to this, the challenge of climate change is that we have not been, the awareness, though it affects many people, they do not link their livelihoods, challenges with it. In such a way that when we talk about Ministry of Agriculture, are they affected by climate change when it doesn't rain? What about the energy we use? We rely on energy. When there is no water, there is. But now the problem is no one really, there is very little awareness. And to address that, we decided to establish an award scheme for Africa. PACJA is an African continental organization, but based in Kenya. So we have been doing that, and today, actually, with the Nairobi, at the event at Nairobi County, we established this African Climate Change Climate Change and Environmental Reporting Awards. So we started so that now we are going to reward journalists. It is to incentivize journalists so that they can report more and spread awareness. And you are also welcome to send a story.
We are already doing something. We have the EcoWatch show, so that is
even EcoWatch actually is a good candidate. So we are waiting for that entry, and I think there is a lot of lucrative incentives to do that and to encourage the journalists.
All right, Mwenda, we've run out of time, but thank you both gentlemen for coming to our studios. Of course, I've been talking to Mithika Mwenda, who is the CEO for Pan-Africa Climate Justice Alliance, as well as John Kioli, who is the CEO for Green Africa Foundation, just putting into perspective where we are as a country when it comes to protecting our environment, given that today we were marking the World Environment Day.